Avatar: The Last Airbender is an amazing show with a wide variety of well-written characters. The MCU likewise is a giant movie franchise spanning a decade plus worth of content from shows to movies with great characters and fun stories. However, no matter how good the heroes are, there must be equally great villains for the story to really take off. In a previous video of mine, I merged members of Team Avatar with their respective heroes from the MCU. This video will take an opposite turn on the good-evil spectrum, since I'll be taking the villains from Avatar and combining them with other villains from, again, the MCU. Before we get started, please give this video a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and most importantly, I hope you enjoy. The first character I'll have the honor of attempting is the Flirt Master, Zuko's younger sister, Azula. There were many villains from the MCU to choose from, but ultimately I ended up sticking with the Scarlet Witch after the Darkhold got its grip on her. The main reason I chose this character for Azula wasn't because she's so powerful, or that she also has a brother, but mainly because Azula's side bangs are pretty similar shapes with the tiara that Wanda has. The rough sketch was proceeding pretty well and I was enjoying the general pose I had drawn. Once I was satisfied with the process, I moved on to the inking, and even though I'm still quite insecure about my drawing ability, I was very much enjoying how this one was coming along. However, I wasn't the biggest fan of how messy everything looked, so I did another layer of inking, and in the previous Avatar as MCU characters video, I stuck with the color scheme of Team Avatar. This time around, I want to try using the color scheme of the MCU counterparts. In this instance, their colors were pretty similar, so it ended up not mattering altogether. However, there was one thing I did change. Instead of using the red glowy witchy magic that Wanda likes to sparkle from her fingers, I stuck with Azula's patented blue flames to stay at least somewhat true to her character. The flames were another story altogether. I couldn't really make them look like flames, and instead Azula's powers here looked like they belonged to the Shigo family. I wish it could look more flamey, but at the end of the day, it's perfectly fine. And it was at this moment that I realized that the specific Scarlet Witch outfit I had chosen wasn't the one from Doctor Strange 2. Instead, I believe it was from WandaVision, but to stay faithful to my villain prompt, I ended up choosing another reference image from the correct source and made some changes before proceeding onwards. This second attempt at Azula definitely looks a lot more detailed and a lot sharper, but not too sharp. I wouldn't want to puncture the hull of an Empire-class Fire Nation battleship, leaving thousands to drown at sea. And here we have Princess Azula as the Scarlet Witch. This one took way longer than expected, mainly because I had to redo the drawing halfway through, but besides that it went fairly smoothly. I didn't know what to expect going into this drawing, but I ended up coming out of it really excited to proceed with the next character. And that next character would be none other than her own father, the Phoenix King, for a total of like 30 minutes, Fire Lord Ozai. The only other character that made sense for me to match up with Ozai was Wenwu from Shang-Chi. Not only are they both heads of evil nations/organizations, but they also have a son and daughter and a lost wife, although one is definitely a lot sadder about it than the other. For this drawing, I tried to do kind of a Kamehameha pose where Ozai will be ramping up his rings to unleash a devastating attack. As you'll see throughout this section, I struggled real hard figuring out the proportions and the placements of certain body parts. I kept making minor adjustments well into the inking and even the coloring layer. I did give Ozai his Fire Nation headpiece since that's pretty important to his character design, and without it he's just another guy. Much like Azula's drawing before this one, I had to do a second layer of inking just to clean up the line work, but even on this second layer, the head just didn't look right to me. In spite of the proportions being off, I decided to push through to the coloring by using Wenwu's color scheme for the outfit and Ozai's color scheme for the ring's power. But again, I was only delaying the inevitable because I knew that sooner or later I had to fix the issue with his pose. I do regret it now waiting till the very end of the drawing instead of figuring it all out in the beginning with the underdrawing portion. But yeah, Ozai's kappa was detated from his body, something Aang never had the heart to do. I used this to figure out the correct placement, and I decided to turn off the coloring layer, or at least just make it invisible so I can get a clearer look at the line work to add on to. I ended up relocating his arm as well since it was way too high up, and now this definitely looks a lot better than before. All that was left was to finish up the coloring, and although I'm not the biggest fan of how Ozai turned out at the end, I still enjoyed the process and he definitely looks a whole lot better than what was the first version. Next, we have Azula's right-hand woman, Ty Lee. I chose Yelena as the mashup choice, and although Yelena technically isn't a villain, she's not a hero either, so I figured it still counted. I first attempted to do the classic superhero pose that Yelena made fun of in Black Widow, but I decided against it in the end and chose another pose where Ty Lee is in a fighting stance. In contrast to the Ozai drawing where it took a long time to be pleased with the final pose, I pretty much liked how Ty Lee's rough sketch turned out from the get-go. I moved on to the inking phase without hesitation, and luckily with this one I only needed one layer of inking, progress. I transitioned over to the coloring soon after, and I continued to use the MCU's palette, although there really isn't much of a palette here. The base colors came and went quickly enough where all that was left were the shadows and the highlights. The shading was simple enough, but the more I looked at what I expected to be the final result, the more I felt like something was missing. There was a noticeable lack of detail, especially on the lower half of this drawing. I added extra additions to the drawing just to flesh out the design a bit more. The first thing I did was to add some lines, which granted did make it look like she was wearing baseball pants, but soon afterwards I went ahead and tried my hand at making some more shapely shadows, which I have to say turned out so much better than anticipated. Ty Lee and Tylena, she ended up being my favorite one out of the three we had just done. The drawing is pretty simple granted, but something about it makes me feel like I'm improving. Going from the cheerful and bright Ty Lee to the dark and moody Mei was a bit of a sudden transition, but a transition nonetheless. For some reason, Mei just screams hella goddess of death to me, so that's why I ended up choosing for her mashup. I started feeling so much more confident in my rough sketches after the last couple of drawings, and I was breezing through this process. I gave Mei Hella's weird antlers and her outfit. Because both characters mainly wear black, the color choices just seem to fit each other very nicely. The whole process ended up being so much simpler than the previous ones that I'm having difficulty finding things to talk about. Besides adding the little lines on the outfit, this was very straightforward. All in all, I liked how this one turned out. It's not my favorite one of the bunch, but with how quick this took, I can't complain. We're moving on to our next character, and Admiral Zhao is my next villain of choice. This sniveling first season villain somehow felt very similar to how I viewed Ronan the Accuser from the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Both were seemingly powerful and formidable villains when they first introduced, but by the end they don't really hold a candle to the big bad. I mean, Zhao did steal the moon, but maybe for like 30 minutes. Big deal, Gru did the exact same thing.
I've got the moon!
Ronan the Accuser's armor looked like it was going to give me trouble. The rough sketch did take me quite a bit to get right, but after enough brute force it came out the way I wanted it to look. The inking was quite easy because I was able to break down the armor into basic shapes. The part that ended up taking the longest was the coloring and the adding of little details to the suit. It was tough to get the color right, and after many attempts, I moved on to the shading and the detailing. I'll be completely honest, I had no idea what I was doing here. I just kept trying different things, throwing different brushes at different parts of the armor, until something stuck. After a quick time-lapse of my struggles, here is Zhao the Accuser, the Moon Borrower. This one was a struggle, but I knew that it was time to move on to the last character, which in my opinion turned out the best. So, I guess saving the best for last, the last character I wanted to move away from the Fire Nation altogether and try my hand at the leader of the Freedom Fighters, Jet. I'm going to put him into the villain category, at least because of the first season due to his actions and not his motives. I ultimately ended up choosing Whiplash since his two whips would be a pretty good substitute for the two kebab skewers that Jet wields. I originally wanted to choose Killmonger for Jet since in my mind it just makes sense, but as I was looking at Killmonger's base outfit there really wasn't anything going on, and I also felt that it wasn't that recognizable. Another option was to do Killmonger's Black Panther outfit, but after drawing Mei and Hela, I wanted a break from another dark, skin-tight outfit. I could also just do the shirtless one, but again, I decided that Whiplash might be quite fun. As you can see, I let Jet wear his normal clothes and this little leaf thing that he has in his mouth constantly. The only difference is now he has Whiplash's chest piece and the baggy jumpsuit that's wrapped around his hips. There were a decent amount of details to add as I transitioned onto the coloring phase. I know I mentioned how I wanted to stick with the MCU color scheme throughout this video, but Whiplash doesn't really have much going on for him in terms of color, so for this drawing only I decided to stick with Jet's colors. As we time-lapsed through, I worked on adding shading using the multiply layer, my brush and blur tools, and then I added another multiply layer for another layer of darker shadows. It was time for my most anticipated part, which were the lightning whips. I zigged and zagged to my heart's content until I felt that the whips were properly represented. After changing the pants to fit Jet's color schemes, I was finally done. I mentioned how Ty Lee was my favorite drawing I've done in this video, but this one has to take the cake for my favorite one. I am technically finished now, but there was a little part of me that wanted to see what Combustion Man, aka Sparky Boob Man, would look like as the Winter Soldier. I ended up not doing this character because I had already done the Winter Soldier in a previous video, but I really wanted to try, so here's a quick rough sketch of him as I'm winding down this video. I feel like each drawing had their own set of challenges that I was able to utilize for this mashup. I had a blast with this video type the first time around, but it was so much more fun the second time. I'm not sure if it's because I feel much more confident with my sketches or the fact that I feel like I'm actually seeing some progress between each of my uploads, but I'm having a blast working on these personal mini projects of mine. Whether they be simple character drawings like this video, or remastering Avatar videos, or even creating comics out of movies, it's nice to see me improve throughout my channel. At least, I think I'm improving. But that's primarily why I continue to do these videos, and I hope you're enjoying watching them as much as I'm enjoying making them. Please comment down below which one was your favorite, leave a like if you haven't already, subscribe if you want to see more, and most importantly, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and bye.